It is with children that we have the best chance of studying the development of logical knowledge, mathematical knowledge, physical knowledge, and so forth. This was said by Jean Piaget, and he is a Swiss psychologist who studied child development. Now, with that being said, we all went through stages of development in our life. So I want you to think about the children in your life. It might be your brother's kids, your sister's kids, your cousins. But I want you to think about why they do certain things that they do. Some things might seem weird that they do, but they might be necessary in the child's development. Now, for my speech today, I'm going to talk to you guys about child development and how there are multiple stages involved, and I hope that I can ultimately give you guys a better understanding on why or when children do the things that they do. I worked at a daycare for 3 years, from kids from ages 3 months to about 15 years. So I had a lot of chances to watch children grow in many different areas of their development. And it's always been a life goal of mine to work with kids. I've always wanted to work with kids. I love them. I've always wanted kids. So children have 5 critical stages of development in their early childhood where they develop their basic skills, including cognitive development, social emotional development, speech and language development, and motor skills development. The first critical stage in a child's development is cognitive development. This is where they think, explore, and figure things out on their own. Now, Jean Piaget was a huge factor in the development of cognitive development because he was the one that said that children just think differently than adults, because back then everyone thought that children just were less intelligent than adults. But Jean Piaget came up with the fact that children just think differently. They're not less intelligent. And this is what brought him to come up with the 4 stages of cognitive development. And these stages I got from my professor, Prudhoe, from Westchester University. And the first stage is the sensory motor stage, which is from about birth to 2 years. This is where children will acquire knowledge through sensory experiences and playing with objects, figuring out how things work, and they're doing this on their own. The next stage is the pre-operational stage. It's from about 2 to 7 years old. This is where they have a lot of language improvements and they start to think symbolically. The next stage is the concrete operational stage, which is from about 7 to 11 years. This is where they have an increase in their logic, and this is also where they tend to struggle with abstract ideas or hypothetical concepts because it gets a little confusing to them, because this is when they're just starting to think about things more logically. And the last stage is the formal operational stage, which is from about 12 years and older. This is where they have an increase in their logic, like at the previous stage, but it's even more increased from there. They have the ability to use deductive reasoning, and they have an understanding of abstract ideas, which they struggled with in the previous stage. The next critical stage in a child's development involves the social emotional development. This is where they interact and they learn their self-control. This begins at birth, but it shows more at 24 to 36 months. And some of the examples of it beginning at birth would be smiling at the parents or familiar faces that they recognize, or giving facial expressions like showing that they're sad or happy. But more around 24 or 36 months, you'll start seeing them play social games and showing more emotions. A Columbia University study studied the social emotional development in early childhood, and they found that 9.5 and 14.2% of children from birth to 5 years experience social emotional problems. The third critical stage in a child's development involves speech and language development. This is where they use their skills to communicate with others. And a popular question that is usually asked is, when do babies usually start talking? So at 3 months, they'll start cooing, which is just small little sounds. And then around 6 months, they will usually start babbling, which is kind of stringing together more coos. And around 9 months, they'll start understanding basic words like yes or no. And around 18 months, they'll be able to say simple words like mama or dada. And around 2 years, they'll be able to start saying short phrases. And then around 3 years, they should be able to start talking. The last critical stage in a child's development involves the development of motor skills. There's two kinds of motor skills. There's gross motor skills and fine motor skills. The gross motor skills are more of the large muscle groups, and then the fine motor skills involves the small muscle groups. And this begins at birth and it continuously grows throughout their lifetime. Examples of fine motor skills would be small toys, pressing buttons, or picking up the puffs with their precision grip. That's what this is called. And then some gross motor skills would be lifting their head or sitting up, standing, walking. And these skills will help the children explore the world, and it will also help them and grow in many other developmental stages. Now, throughout this speech, I hope I gave you guys a better understanding on child development, and I hope it inspired you to help the children around you grow. There are 4 critical stages in a child's development, and those stages include cognitive development, social emotional development, speech and language development, and motor skills development. I want to end you guys off on a quote that I liked from Andrew Garner, and he says, "We see how early childhood experiences are so important to lifelong outcomes, how the early environment literally becomes embedded in the brain and changes its architecture."